the #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.
Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 223 of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments with me, your host, Richard Bexon. Today, we're going to be talking with Alex McGowin. We've had him on before. He's a US CPA, owner of McGowin Tax, a company that focuses on tax for expats and kind of navigating the often confusing and difficult subject of how to manage foreign income, ownership, and investments. We're also going to touch on self-directed IRAs or Roth IRAs and how that you can basically kind of roll them into Costa Rica and invest in Costa Rica and the things that you can invest into as well. Guys, remember, if you're interested in investing in Costa Rica, you can reach out to us, info@investing@costarica.com. We do have a wide variety of stuff, everything from relocation to investment advice to real estate to project management, construction overseeing, owners reps. We also have a long-term car rental business as well. But again, you can email us info@investing@costarica.com or just go to the website, investingcostarica.com, fill out a form, and we will get in contact with you straight away. We usually respond, I would probably say, within the hour. And also, no obligation, guys. You don't need a book or buy anything with us. Just have a conversation with us. We're more than happy to chat and kind of point you in the right direction. As I always say, I'm a sucker for helping people. But let's get straight into the podcast. Good afternoon, Alex. How you doing?
Hey, Richard, doing good. How are you?
Yeah, good, man. I'm getting confused with it's morning, day. I'm not too sure whether I'm losing the marbles here or the jet lag is catching up with me.
It'll do that. It's light outside either way.
True, very true. It's raining hard here in Costa Rica. I mean, as we start to transition from kind of the rainy season to the dry season here. So I'm looking forward to the dry season.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, Alex, the first question I always love to ask is just get an idea of kind of what's going on in your work. I mean, I know there's been quite a bit of volatility. I mean, you guys are being bombarded with election stuff up there, which we don't hear anything about down here, which is kind of nice. But I mean, with regards to the volume of inquiries that you're getting and the work that you're getting from expats, specifically, let's say for Costa Rica, is it still increasing? Is it pretty steady? Has it been decreasing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it always increases a little bit around big election times. And this one they seem to get bigger and more politically intense every time. But yeah, it picks up, and Costa Rica in particular is a very desirable place for a lot of Americans. I mean, I do hear some of the, if so-and-so wins, I'm moving the country, announcing my citizenship. I hear that, and I have some people that do it. It's pretty rare that somebody actually goes through with with that process. But I would say in general, like I am getting it's more so now I'm getting people that are kind of moving or investing outside of the US, Costa Rica in particular, with a kind of an anxious impulse, as opposed to specifically, I just love Costa Rica or want to move abroad. There is a little bit of anxiety that I'm feeling from people with their investments and moves. And that's pretty natural around elections. But like I said, this one seems a little bit more intense, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Look, I mean, we see a lot of people looking to diversify outside of their home country just because, they just want to diversify, which I think is smart. And I mean, it's kind of cool to invest in Costa Rica as well, because a lot of the time when you're investing, you get to use it and enjoy it, etc. With most things down here. So I always say it's a lifestyle investment. It beats putting money in the stock market because, well, depending on what you do, you can kind of enjoy it down here as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's two different. I mean, I encourage investments outside the U.S. for diversification purposes. The people moving is a different story because it's more of a traditional move. But yeah, I mean, and one of the things, what's interesting about this election is I think because it's so tight. I mean, because I do about half of what I do is actually U.S. citizens living outside the U.S. And they in particular kind of get a raw deal in some cases. I mean, of course there's ways we can plan and make things tax efficient, but at the end of the day, certain investments and things like that when you're outside the US, I mean, just the reporting requirements in general, if nothing else, it's annoying, right? That you're still having to report things in the US. But Trump actually came out and said that he is going to do away with citizenship-based taxation in the US for
Wow.
expats. He said that as part of his campaign. And that's never really been talked about. It's never really been on the table
Yep.
before. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, the expats, there's not enough of them. They're not loud enough. It's not politically, but I think the estimate's around 9 million Americans live outside the US. And, that's 9 million people that could swing a vote,
Yeah.
in one way or the other. So I
Yeah.
don't really believe it. So I don't think people need to take that to the bank necessarily. I definitely would not. But it's interesting that it's being talked about. And to me, it just shows that the number and the noise is growing to where, as races get closer and you have more people outside the US, I mean, it
Yeah.
could be really
I
make sense.
also investments are going to get more global. I mean, wind the clock back 50 years, nobody was really investing internationally. Now, I mean, a lot of people are investing internationally because, again, for various reasons, diversification, and that could be diversification of the asset product, it could be diversification out of currency, because you
Yeah.
also have to deal with the currency fluctuations. I mean, the advantage that we have here in Costa Rica, of course, the majority of stuff is US dollars, like Panama, but there are some countries where you can't buy in US dollars and you have to use local currency. But look, a lot
Right.
of people, I had a conversation with someone the other day, was like, I was like, I think you should take a look at there was a structure for doing business. And he was like, okay, I'll talk to my Costa Rican accountant. I'm like, dude, your Costa Rican accountant knows nothing about probably international tax, if that makes sense. Like, you need to be
Right.
speaking to someone probably in the US that understands Costa Rica taxation if you're going to they were going to set up a pass-through entity inside the US for basically
Yeah.
money to kind of flow down to Costa Rica to another corporation. And he was like, well, I'll speak to my accountant. And I was like, no, you need to do that the other way around. You need to speak to a US, accountant, not your Costa
Right.
Rican accountant to kind of figure that out. But I mean, what questions do you think people should be asking when looking for an accountant that understands, international tax to make sure he or she is really knows what they're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I started my business with the sole or my main my main client was small to mid-size US CPA firms that have a handful or one or two clients that are international. Because at the end of the day, those firms, it's not worth it for them to learn a whole new set of rules and train their staff on it for their one or two international people. And that's what I see a lot with people, especially with the foreign investment people. Because I mean, you could be working with your CPA for 40 years in the US and you have a great relationship, they do great work, but as soon as you do something internationally, they just don't do that type of work. So, I mean, I think it comes down to, if you're working with your personal CPA you've been working with for a while and you're changing your strategy to start doing something internationally, it's having an honest conversation with them to see. I mean, I think the point blank question is, what is your experience with international tax work in the US? And getting that answer, I would be a little nervous with somebody if you're kind of their guinea pig, of course, you
Yeah.
know. And then see what they're open to. I mean, I don't encourage people to necessarily drop their accountant for the sake of one real estate investment in Costa Rica when the other 99% of what you have going on is still in the US and you have a good relationship with your accountant. So maybe it's just plugging somebody in that can help with that piece.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, it's a coordination at the end of the day. So usually the US is the more complicated of the coordination, but it's a coordination between the local jurisdiction and the US and also within your advisors in the US. So yeah, just seeing what kind of experience they have and if you can get any specifics on that, and then seeing what they're open to with working with somebody that has that specific international experience, I think is the way to go.
Alex, what are some of the common questions you get asked by, current clients and potential clients?
On the investment side, it's almost always structuring, is how do I need to, so with a real estate investment structure, say outside the US or in Costa Rica, it's usually how do I structure this? And
And what's your advice?
Yeah, and I've kind of changed my tune a little bit over the last year. I mean, what happens is in the US, and when you set up, usually what I see is the person needs to set up a foreign company or a company in the local jurisdiction, so in Costa Rica. I'm seeing that about not. It's a kind of inconsistent the way I see that in Costa Rica. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about
Well,
why you go there.
I think it's probably inconsistent of whether it's in their personal name or whether it's in a company name based on
Right.
advice they get, but also as if they want to get residency here in Costa Rica, they have to do it in their personal name. They can do it in a corporation. It's just changing a little bit and it's become a little bit difficult. Whereas if you do it in your personal name now, it is easier.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you do it through a company, which I see about half the time, like a Costa Rican company, I generally tell people to make the election to treat that as a flow through so
Yep.
that it's not a corporation for US tax purposes. Two main reasons, especially if it's going to be a rental property. If it's a personal residence and it's not, you're not really planning, this isn't like a business venture, then it's a little different. I think it's okay to keep it in the corporate form. But if you keep it in a foreign corporation that's not a flow through, without getting too deep in the
Sure.
technical nuance, really, I mean, you lose the ability to carry forward losses, which is a problem,
Yep.
especially on the rental side. And then also, if you sell it in the future, you're missing out on capital gain taxation rates versus ordinary income rates. And it's kind of a complicated way of where you get there, but that's where it ends up in a lot of cases. So I usually say make what's called a check the box election so it flows through. And then it's also easier on your CPA. That's where I can kind of step in to make sure that election gets made properly. And then your CPA, at that point, the tax side of it is just very similar to how you would do it for a US rental property. It just goes on your personal tax return. Um, I mean, the other option is to structure in the US as well, to have companies in the US. And that kind of just depends on, to me, that's more of a, maybe not estate planning, but just a future
Yeah.
planning alternative. I mean, sometimes it's easier to pass ownership and things like real estate if you have it held in a trust structure or a company structure in the US. So that's maybe less of a tax rate question and more of just a
Well,
personal, what's your plan with this property?
Well, and that's the same in Costa Rica as well. If you have it in your personal name and you die, you have to go through probate here, which is a nightmare. But if you have in a corporation, you can already set up with the lawyer that transfer and it only gets executed, if someone passes away, basically.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
and
it's
that's
yeah.
usually that's usually what I mean. I would say, I mean, a trust structure in the US or an LLC that either owns the property directly in Costa Rica or through a Costa Rican
Yeah.
company, but having it all flow through generally makes sense. It's the simplest and gives you usually the best tax answer.
Okay. Are there any other common questions that you get?
Um, I mean, on the real estate side, it's usually, I mean, one thing that people ask a lot is, what is the difference? Depreciation, for example. That's one of the biggest deductions because a lot of times when I tell people, my original spiel of why we should make that election for it to flow through, part of that reason is because you're probably going to have losses on the rental that we want to pick up in the US. And then they say, hold up, why do I have losses? I'm making money. And
Yeah.
part of that, they're not thinking about the depreciation deduction. So in the US, there's it's a 27 and a half year depreciation for buildings. And then you can lower that down if you look into like specific fixed assets within the building, furniture and things like that. It's similar when it's outside the US, but if it's a foreign property, there's actually a 30-year life on depreciable assets, and it has to be over a straight line basis. So 30 years over the life of the loan, I mean, over the life of the property. I'm sorry, a 30-year
Yeah.
life on the property. And so that's your depreciation deduction. So that's a little different, but otherwise there's not a lot different. Another thing I get is 1031 exchanges.
Yep.
Um, those actually that works outside the US.
You just can't bring it back to the US, right?
Right. It's got to be a foreign to foreign exchange.
Yep.
You can't exchange across the border, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the question I get actually sometimes is, and I don't have the answer for it. I'm like, I think you need to speak to an accountant on this one. Is, if a US citizen owns a vacation rental in Costa Rica and they have to travel down there, per se to oversee the business or something, can they deduct all their travel expenses?
Uh, yes, potentially.
Yep.
I mean, uh, basically, as long as you can prove that the majority of the reason that you traveled down there is for the purposes of that vacation rental,
Yep.
then you can deduct the percentage associated with the activity on that rental. So said differently, I mean, the rental property is a business. And if you're
Yep.
traveling overnight for business purposes, and the majority of that travel is for business purposes, then you can deduct everything to the extent taking out the personal side. So for
Yeah.
example, if you go down for a week and you're going to spend, 5 days, 5 of the days are specifically related to the rental property, that you're doing some type of work for that rental property for 5 of those days. And 2 days, you're going to the beach to meet some friends or something like that. You can deduct, whatever 5 divided by 7 is
Yep.
of your stay, your travel, your meals, all of that. So generally, yeah, you just want to, I guess the short answer is you want to make sure that the majority of your time is spent on the rental. Because if you go down there for a week and you spend one day at the rental property and the rest you go to San Jose or wherever you go that's
Yeah.
more personal, then you really can't deduct
But I
everything.
mean, if you meet with your accountant one day, you meet the next day with your lawyer, the next day you meet with your property management company, the next day, I don't know, you end up meeting with some other people.
Work
Like,
on your books, I
yeah,
mean, it doesn't have to be, I mean, the important thing is that you have contemporaneous records. So it is good to like make some type of note contemporaneously that day of what you
yep,
did with related to the rental property. But yeah.
interesting. I mean, a lot of the stuff what's coming up at the moment, and I mean, we are actually dealing with it, is self-directed IRAs, because they can be basically invested into foreign assets, if I'm
Yeah.
correct. So, we spoke to a guy the other day that because we were asking, and I actually asked you about it. But US citizens can invest basically their self-directed IRAs into real estate in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm seeing a lot more of it too. I actually talked to somebody today, an investment advisor that manages those types of funds. And it does, I mean, you have to have a custodian that will deal with the foreign assets. So I mean,
Yep.
it's not a like general rule for the self-directed IRA that you can invest in foreign real estate. It's specific to the custodian that you use. But
Yep.
I mean, there's a bunch of them that's pretty easy to find. There's ones you can even, um, well, yeah, there's several that you can. I mean, but there are some specific rules related to it. I mean, one is that you can't have any personal use of that property. So
Yep.
you can't like your rental property, you can't go down there and spend personal use days. You can't take money out of that, obviously, like so the rental income or something like that. It has to stay within the IRA or the fund. But the hardest part with it is really the thing and I haven't found all the right answers for this yet, but the hardest part is making the investment itself from the IRA
Yep.
because you can't buy a property and contribute it to the self-directed IRA. The IRA has to purchase the property and
Correct.
you're limited to $7,000 a year of contributions. That's the general rule. So I mean, it'd take you a long time to get to a $500,000 property or something. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's other ways of doing that though. I mean, you can roll money in from another retirement account into that IRA. Um, it depends on if it's a Roth or a traditional IRA. You can do both. If you roll into a Roth IRA, obviously you might have some tax implications because the Roth is a better investment tool in that case, but it's post-tax money. So if you're putting in pre-tax money and rolling that in, you're going to take a tax hit on the front end. So that's usually the tricky part is getting it funded,
Yeah.
but there's ways around it.
We spoke with someone the other day because we've got some fractional investment stuff that we've been working on, and they reviewed the documentation and was like, "Yeah, this is perfect, dude. Like you can do this very very easily, because
Yeah.
they're investing into a corporation."
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and that I think that makes it even easier when you're buying shares in a
Correct.
project or something,
Correct.
as opposed to buying the property directly. Not that, I mean, you can do either one, but
Yep.
I think paperwork wise, um, I think you run into some problems with titling and things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do it, but you got to get the right team
Yeah, you do.
that's
You do.
familiar with that process.
Definitely. Well, I mean, look, I think it's great that the US is kind of opening up a little bit more to foreign kind of investments. I mean, again, it still kind of sucks because I know you guys have a bunch of paperwork in order to do, it just, as you said there, kind of sounds like it just doubles the paperwork on your side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, I think it gets said a lot, the complication of the US tax rules, and it can be, but usually, I mean, if you get ahead of it on the front end, it's
Yeah.
not that complicated. I mean, investing in a foreign property, investing in, foreign investments, it's not really that complicated or that different than investing in the US. It's just important on the front end, you get it structured correctly, and then it flows nicely going forward. Where the complications come in and where it usually gets the bad rap is when we're unwinding problems. And then it does
Yep.
definitely get complicated. So get on the front end of it. And yeah, it is more paperwork in some cases, but yeah, the goal is to simplify and save taxes, not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, my last question for you, as we've kept you long enough, Alex, this has been great. If you inherited $500,000 and you had to invest it into a business or real estate in Costa Rica, what would you invest it in and why?
Um, yeah, I'd probably come to you, Richard, and help me out. But no, I would probably do something that at least has some personal that I can enjoy personally.
Yep.
Something down on the beach that I can enjoy personally, and try to find something I could also make some money on. So that'd be the goal. I like coming down to Costa Rica, so I try to make an excuse to come down there more often with that money.
Can you write it? Yeah, I mean, I suppose you would probably find a way to write your taxes off on it as well. So yeah, you could travel down and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know how to make that move for sure.
Well, Alex, again, very much appreciate your time coming here on the podcast. Anyone that wants to get in contact with you, I'll put all of your contact details in the description down below. But very much appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, sir.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate it.
No worries. Ciao. Guys, I always love to chat tax. Don't think anybody loves to pay it, but I always love to find ways, in order to help clients and help myself, when it comes to tax structures there. And, I think the interesting thing there is, again, just making sure that your US tax accountant understands international tax, because I can tell you that probably your Costa Rican accountant will not understand the UX tax code. And it's a lot more complicated than here in Costa Rica. But again, if you need any help with that or just advice, Alex's details are all in the description down below. If you've enjoyed the podcast, guys, please subscribe. Again, getting quite a community going here. Appreciate everyone's support. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover, you can email us info@investing@costarica.com. We'd be happy to see if we can find someone and kind of cover that. But really appreciate you taking the time to join us, guys, the support, and continue to pass the pod to various people in the country and I suppose the world. But thanks very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye.
The #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.